this is going to be not just how, like, hacks, things like that, how to avoid founder burnout. This is actually understanding why it happens, addressing some deeper concepts here. So I really didn't focus on a lot of the simple stuff like, oh, if you're stressed out, maybe you should just go take a walk. There's a little bit of that addressed, but I want to make sure that what we're really focusing on here is the real issues and, understanding why these things occur. And once this is really a number of different presentations all smashed together, so I can give you guys as much information as possible in a very short amount of time. So between sections, I'm going to try to stop and let you guys ask any questions that you have. So to begin with, we have, what is burnout? What's really important to understand here is that burnout isn't actually a thing that has been fully described or agreed upon. There's a lot of different symptoms or causes that are attributed to burnout, but there's not any one, clinical definition for burnout per se. What is interesting is that when you look at the Mayo Clinic's top risk factors for burnout in a job, they include that you identify so strongly with work that you lack a reasonable balance between your work life and personal life. You try to be everything to everyone. You work in a helping profession. You feel you have little or no control over your work, and your job is monotonous. Well, when we look at that, it sounds like a lot of these things, maybe even a monotonous job, can apply to a founder. So I'm going to go through a couple of key impact areas that you'll notice burnout starting to occur, because it's important to start to recognize these things as they occur in your body. This is not trying to diagnose anything. This is just helping to make you aware. So I'm going to fly through this stuff. If you have questions specifically about it, I am happy to come back to it and answer those questions. So energy, you're constantly tired. You start to lack internal motivation. So think about, you're no longer motivated to go and do all that, hustling that you used to do. You're no longer really caring to get up in the morning and go do that work that you once loved. And really, it's not just a physical exhaustion, but it's mentally exhausted and also emotionally exhausted. You just sometimes cease to really care. Emotionally, you're dealing with frustration, you're dealing with cynicism, oftentimes feeling hopeless and helpless and disillusioned about the work that you're doing. And as an entrepreneur, you can be pretty confident that those are not the types of emotions and feelings that you want to be feeling, and not something that we're generally known as portraying in the work that we do. As far as performance is concerned, you're overall going to see a decrease in performance, but from an entrepreneur's perspective, oftentimes we feel like this is what is causing our burnout, is that we've decreased our performance overall. So there's a little bit of a chicken or the egg situation here, but it's important to notice really what is that performance decrease. Is it something that is acute, like you're dealing with just some particular situation that you can push through? Or is it something that's much longer term? Have you decreased in performance and your ability to work year over year, for instance? One of the other things that comes up often is difficulty concentrating. Now, as somebody with diagnosed ADHD and an entrepreneur, I know that a lot of us have to deal with difficulties in concentrating, but this is an increase in your inability to concentrate, much more difficult than normal. So this isn't just like, hey, I have a hard time sitting still. This is inability to stay focused on really any task, either large or small. Feeling that you're constantly working and making no progress, and feeling stuck or plateaued. Relationship problems almost always start to arise, and oftentimes this is when we start to really realize that we have an issue with burnout. Interpersonal problems occurring both at home and at work, a much shorter temper. You're constantly preoccupied with work. Many of us already are as entrepreneurs. We're always thinking about the next thing that we have to do, the next thing that needs to be accomplished. So this is difficult because it's easy to identify with a lot of these things and still not be actually burnt out. But it's worth noting these things because over time, if you continue to engage in these activities, they may start to reflect or build into burnout longer term. Bringing work problems and home and personal problems to work, once again, as entrepreneurs, there's not a big difference between our work and personal lives in a lot of cases. So I know that is a challenge for a lot of us, but it's once again worthy to note because it's something that we can work on. Lastly, these can start to manifest into physical issues as well. You can develop headaches, digestive issues. Something IBS is something that occurs quite a bit with people who are dealing with burnout, irritable bowel syndrome, also acid reflux, things like that. Ultimately, can lead to heart disease, increase in frequency of illness. It can also lead to obesity, all sorts of other issues. But I think it is really important to note that things like headache and digestive issues, and also just generally aches and pains, can come from this. As you're sitting here right now, you may even notice that you're hunched, you're tight, you're straining yourself, or you're sitting and your head is forward. I'll switch over so that we've got full view in a moment. All of these things can start to put strains on your body that, when you start putting together all 5 of these elements, you're going to start to see the symptoms of burnout much more quickly. Ultimately, as I said at the beginning, there's no hacks here. There's no single thing that you can do to prevent burnout. There are a lot of different practices and a lot of things that you can do to help avoid it, but there's no single thing that you can do. There's not a pill to take. There's not a mantra to say. There's not a single one thing to avoid burnout, particularly as an entrepreneur. You have nobody that's telling you exactly what to do every day. So it is your responsibility to step up and take control in these situations. So I'm going to get out of the screen share momentarily. And if I can. And briefly, anybody have questions thus far about these symptoms? I'll go back to what I was saying about physical manifestation real quick as well. If you're sitting there at the computer, hunched over, oftentimes, even while we walk, you'll see people, if I've got a phone in my hand, looking down, you notice how my neck is extended. All of these things will, over time, start to put much more strain on our necks and on our shoulders, which will 100%, I guarantee you, will start to manifest in additional stress, headaches. We call them a lot of times tension headaches. When I used to experience this stuff, I found that coffee oftentimes seemed to help. It was the caffeine in the coffee, so I thought I was tired. It wasn't just my posture and the way that I was conducting myself. So I'll also briefly, I think, just to give you guys an idea of why this is something that I care about so much. About 2.5, I guess now it's almost 3.5 years ago, I was completely overworked. I was working, my wife will vouch for, sleeping 2 hours a night, often nights. And I gained a lot of weight. I was 50 pounds heavier than I am today. And actually looked a lot older as well. But I ended up with tons of headaches, tons of tension. And I pushed myself to the point that I ultimately decided to sell my businesses and move from Denver to the beach here in Manhattan Beach, California, and completely changed my life. But now I see the same things happening with entrepreneurs every single day. And so, I've gone through a lot of this myself. I've helped a lot of entrepreneurs go through this stuff. So I really do want to stress that this is something that it's not an easy fix, but you can make these changes and improve your life. So I'm gonna go back to this screen share real quick and show you quite a bit more. And once again, I'm gonna try to blast through these as quickly as I can so that we can get to questions as quickly as possible. I got somebody that somebody says that they can't hear. I want to make sure that if there is somebody that can't hear the conversation right now, just go ahead and say so. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Is that Leanna? Are you able to hear now? Awesome. Cool. So now we are going back to the screen share. And okay, so in particular, now let's address why founders burn out. Founders are notorious for having a higher instance of mental health issues. So 49% in one study of founders indicated that they had at least one issue related to mental health. Dramatic increase over the control groups. There's also 30% of the entrepreneurs are, or 30% of entrepreneurs are likely to experience depression versus 8% of the general public, or the control group in this case. 26% are likely to experience substance abuse, 22% anxiety, ADHD, and so on. So one of the reasons that this occurs is there's so much that goes on underneath the surface for us. We like to show everybody that we are a successful entrepreneur on the surface, but we're hiding everything else beneath the surface. We like to show that we're successful when we're worrying about money, uncertainty about our future. We've got fear, doubts, dealing with the imposter syndrome, and just generally wanting to be accepted by our peers, the people around us, and be respected for the work that we're doing in the world. So depression versus anxiety is important to note here. Most of what we're going to focus on is anxiety, because the most entrepreneurs deal with anxiety because we are so future focused. We're focusing on the things that are going to occur at some point down the road. Now, when we're past focused, that's oftentimes the result of being burnt out and then regretting the decisions that we've made. And over time, burnout will lead to depression. However, anxiety is the thing that pushes us into burnout the most quickly. So I want to dig into anxiety a little bit in particular. Now, I think of anxiety as when you're facing a giant task, something that's in front of you that you just don't possibly know how you're going to get from where you are today to where you need to be. Whether that's you've got you're running out of runway and you've got to go, raise another round. Whether that's a challenge with an employee, a lawsuit, it really doesn't matter what the particular situation is. It's that there's a giant task ahead of you and you don't know what the next steps are. If the larger the task or the further out your focus is, the more likely you are to experience anxiety. Now, one of the first things that you need to do when you're experiencing anxiety of any sort, you need to bring your focus back to the present moment. Focus on the actions that can be completed in the immediate future. That means that these are the tasks that you can go and basically start in the next moment. Not, hey, I need to go raise the next round and I've got only 2 months to do that. Oh my God, what am I going to do? It's break it down into what is that one phone call that you can make right this instant? How can you start moving forward into that solution that you need? It's very important when you are facing any sort of anxiety to clearly define success and clearly identify milestones to that success. We're going to get into that a little bit more shortly, but you want to break down your nearest milestones into manageable tasks. And a task is something that is a single action that can be completed by one person. So when you're facing anxiety, to break this stuff down and focus on single sort of baby steps to move you forward, which we'll also get into, it will make a massive difference in the amount of anxiety that you're facing whenever you're faced with a massive task. So once again, these are bigger concepts. If you guys have questions about like little tactics or strategies for dealing with particular types of anxiety, please let me know and we'll get into those. Now, one of the things that I challenge almost all of my clients to do, and I've done with a lot of people now, is forcing them to get rid of certain words in their vocabulary. One of the things that we often do in order to avoid the near-term tasks and near-term items and avoid a lot of the challenges that we face as entrepreneurs is we use words like busy, slammed, crazy, nuts, you know, whenever somebody asks us what it is that we're facing, or how is our day going? Can you come to dinner tonight? No, I'm way too busy. What we're doing is we're not prioritizing, not focusing on the things that we're actually, that are important to us that we need to try to get done in this moment. And so ultimately it's pushing everything out into the future because of our current emotional state of busyness. And as a result, we're unable to accomplish the things that we care to accomplish. And that leads to greater anxiety. So one of my favorite things to do is challenge people to pay me $100 whenever they say one of these words. And you're welcome to do that. I'll donate it all to charity. But keep track of yourself whenever you say these words. It will make a massive difference in your life. Thus far, do we have any questions about anxiety in particular? All right. Then defining success. So it's not quite what you think here. One of the issues that we have as entrepreneurs is we don't have a job description. Everybody else that we hire has or should have a job description, but we don't have job descriptions for ourselves. And so we model our behavior based upon the experiences and beliefs that we have about what a business owner should be. This is a lot like, you know, when we think about, oh, how should I be a good parent? How should I be a good husband? We just have ideas. There's no manual for how to do this stuff. And oftentimes the people who write the manuals are not necessarily the best people to tell us how to run our businesses. Because let's be honest, you know, a VC, for instance, isn't necessarily going to give you the best advice about how to run a business that you're going to enjoy running and that's going to make you feel successful. He's going to be better off at writing a book that tells you how to successfully build a business that will make him or her money. So when you don't have a job description, you can start to understand how you get into a state of anxiety, because it's not always clear what you need to do next. And so oftentimes you're in a reactive state looking for something that's flying at you. It's just, what's the next thing to go wrong? Because in this state, you're also filling in for for all the people that you have working for you. If you haven't already thought of something, oftentimes when it arises, it's the founder that goes and deals with it. It's the owner that goes and deals with it. I mean, I'm as much to blame as anybody in this stuff. I've gone where, you know, I've had, you know, a couple dozen employees and I'm the one that's plunging a toilet. I've seen plenty of people, including people who are my clients, who they don't have anybody that does graphic design, for instance. And despite the fact that they have, you know, 20, 30 employees, they need something done. So what are they doing? Rather than going out and dealing with much larger issues, they sit down and try to figure out how to use Photoshop. Not a good use of time, and definitely something that will build and add to your anxiety. One of the key actions that you can do here, and this is something that I do with a lot of both my clients and then just people that I talk to that are facing some of these challenges, is actually go through and write out a job description for the role of the ideal leader of your organization. Don't start with what it is that you're doing right now in your organization. Write out the description for the person that you believe would be the ideal candidate. And then go through, and I've got a template for this, which I'm happy to share. If you guys want to get a copy of it, just let me know. Then next, go through and write out a list of your actions, your roles, your responsibilities, everything that you're doing currently in your organization, and then compare these two. Because one of the the key things that happens is we oftentimes always feel that there's something left undone because our mental idea of what it is that we should be doing and our actual actions aren't lining up, but we haven't gotten it out of our head to realize that, oh, geez, the work that I'm doing today is actually not in line with what it is I think I should be doing, but this is what's in front of me. So I'm going to keep, plugging away, doing the same actions today as I did yesterday. But there's an anxiety or a discomfort in me because I know that there's something else that I believe I should be doing. Another issue is that defining success now beyond just the role, but what it is that you're trying to achieve with your business is always a challenge for us. Because the moment that you make money, if you make $1 million, what's the next thing that you're going to do? You're going to make 2 million. Or at least you're going to try to. You don't just say, oh, I'm going to go out and build a business that makes me $1 million and then I'm going to stop. And anybody that has said that, I think has failed miserably either at achieving it or stopping. And if you know somebody that has done that, let me know. I'd love to talk to them. But what ends up happening is we don't have a stationary target for success. And this really occurs when we start to define success in terms of what other people consider success. Even money is often for us comparison based. It's not just providing us freedom, but we're comparing it to other people. We're looking at the size of other people's businesses. We're looking at how much people are paying for our product or service. So as long as we're comparing to other people and we're using something that is an undefined moving target, either one of those, it's going to mean that there's a constant push and pull, and you're never going to feel like you've gotten to a point where you can relax. And as you can imagine, this will ultimately lead to burnout. Now, writing out this is a very basic example of an action here, but writing out what success looks like in terms of what your business looks like at that level, which is the size, the revenue, how many employees, but then more importantly, describe the role that you want to play in that company. Include how much you're going to earn, how much time you're spending, your time commitments, and whether you're traveling for work, whether you are traveling for pleasure. But ultimately, in this process here, you can get down into a much more in-depth process, and this is something I take some of my clients through, which is understanding what are the emotions that you want to feel, what are the experiences you want to have within the business. And so that's something to also consider here, because if your business is constantly, stressing you out and taking you to a place that you don't want to be, no amount of money is going to offset that, especially when that amount of money that you're seeking to earn is constantly moving. That success target is constantly changing. So I challenge you to spend the time to really define success for yourself. Lastly, especially when we're getting started, we're hiring people and not clearly defining their roles. We're keeping everything up in our head and we're saying, hey, I want you to come in and take over all of the website stuff and you take care of operations. And we don't really clarify clear expectations, especially early on. And we don't put things in writing with the people that we work with. And this is, especially for newer founders, this is an issue. And it creates a ton of stress because oftentimes we're also making commitments to people that we can't keep. We're laying out a growth path that's an exponential growth path. Today we're at 0 revenue, but we expect that we're going to be at 10 million by the end of the year. And that means that you're going to be able to grow into this role. In that position, another thing that happens as an entrepreneur, when you consider anxiety, what does that do? It says that we're at one point and then I've committed that we're going to get over to this point, but I don't know how to get there because I thought that this team I hired was going to help me get there. And not only does it create anxiety, but then ultimately it can also lead founders to a place of really feeling helpless and not feeling as though they have any hope of achieving their goals and that they're letting their entire team down in the process. So be extremely clear with what the roles are that you expect people to play, and also how you're going to compensate them, and be really, really, really clear about what it is that you are promising that you have today, i.e. you've got money to pay their salary today, but the growth that you're projecting where you're going to double their salary in 12 months, you may not be able to promise that. So don't promise that. Be upfront with the people that you're working with and just be honest. It will take so much of the stress off of you that will lead to burnout if you don't address it. Now, this is something that I think all of us have felt at some point, this issue of isolation. If you guys have a question at this point, just go ahead and post it. I think I'm seeing everything here. But isolation is something that comes from almost our idea of what a founder should be in the first place. We think that we're being driven by passion, fun, money, success, freedom. We want to stand out. Really what we're doing is we're fighting for our place in the world every single day. But really so much of what we're doing is putting us into a position of standing separate from the crowd. You know, we want to be, whether we're the boss. In fact, I spoke with a couple of people this morning that both had mentioned that they were having, they're facing difficulties that they cannot talk to their coworkers about, or their, even in one case, co-founders, because some of the challenges that we face as business owners, it's not something that, we can turn to our employees and have a conversation about. And in a lot of cases, we're not comfortable talking to our friends, our parents, or our spouses. It's really, really isolating when you're trying to, if you remember that iceberg, appear to be that successful founder, but then also have the inability to share what's really going on. So this idea, this role that we're playing ends up creating a massive separation between us and the rest of the world and the people that we want to be working with. So this is something that I learned the hard way, but an outstanding life is not lived by standing out from others, but by standing with them. And that's something to keep in mind, even as a leader in your company. You can stand with the people. You don't need to separate yourself through success. You don't need to separate yourself in any way, shape, or form. Standing with the people that are around you and being there side by side with them, and not trying to play this sort of king role, if you will come back and serve you in ways that you cannot even imagine. So I just want to remind everybody, this is one of my favorite quotes that I use in these scenarios, and also when it comes to imposter syndrome. But at the end of the day, we're all the same. Kings and philosophers shit, and so do ladies. We're all ultimately, at the end of the day, we're people, we're the same. So when you get into those situations where you're feeling more and more isolated, remember that at the end of the day, you're still a person, and you can talk to other people as a person to a person. You don't need to keep up that role or play the role of being an entrepreneur throughout that. So as far as the roles that we play, I just addressed that, but remember that your success doesn't make you any different or any better than anybody else. You're loved and accepted for the person that you are, and for just merely being you. You're not going to be any more loved and accepted by anybody for building a business. I know that goes way contrary to everything that so many of us build our lives around, but ultimately you are a person. Your business doesn't define you. Your success doesn't define you. Your failures don't define you. You are ultimately just an individual. And one of the things that I lead my work through is that great leaders and great people are indistinguishable. They're exactly the same thing. So you can be a great business leader and a great person. But first and foremost, you have to be a person. And so remember that it's not playing the role of an entrepreneur. It's nothing like that. This is a process of really coming into the world and being, having a positive impact by bringing more of who you are and more of your positivity and more of your gifts into the world. So before I get all super soft on that side, we'll get into something that's a little bit more emotional for some of us. and that is that this separation, this isolation leads to fear. And this quote, I think, speaks to a lot of us, and that is that the amount of fear we have is equal to our separateness. The more separated we are, the more fear there will be. The more that you've built up this big image of being an entrepreneur, of being successful, the more fear there will be that you will be found out. The more fear that there will be that you will lose everything. The more that you've separated yourself because you've made so much money and bought the island and gone off and, distanced yourself from all of your troubles, the more fear there will be that you will lose all of that suddenly. And we'll get to imposter syndrome in a minute, but there's something that, with this quote in particular, I remember sitting, and as I was building my businesses, just thinking at any moment, like, all this stuff that I've created is all just going to disappear because there's going to be some men in like black suits that are just going to come barging through the door and haul me out and reveal that I was a fraud and take everything away that I'd been working so hard for. And I would really, really been working hard at building up this image of being an entrepreneur. So this is really important. So when you do start to feel that fear and that separateness, reach out to somebody that you can set aside that persona of entrepreneurship and just be a person with. And so if that's, a wife, if that's a friend or a colleague, or if you want to call me, just know that there are people out there and it's okay to be a person. So this leads us directly into fear. And this is something that actually drives most of us as entrepreneurs. There's 3 responses to fear. You probably learned this in school. There's fight, flight, or freeze, right? Now, as entrepreneurs, we typically we like to think we use fight, but a lot of times we use flight as well. But to give you an example here, fight is, we're going to take action and attack a problem, or we're going to hustle, maybe go listen to some Gary V YouTube videos and then go hit things harder. Flight can look like hustle. It's workaholism. It's avoiding the challenges, the problems that we have. So just know that oftentimes fight or flight responses, they're fear-based, and they show up in a lot of what we do. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. Vices and distractions. Workaholism is a distraction, but of course, drinking, even Facebooking and daydreaming and all of the other things. I mean, all of these things can be flight responses. And these oftentimes will kick in as we start to feel anxiety of some sort or fear of some sort, which, recall, anxiety is actually a form of fear. So the fear cycle, and now this is something that I love because it explains so much of what we do. This is the basic cycle, and begins with a stimulus, goes through, there's an internal processing, we take action, the internal processing leads to a sensation, take action, the sensation subsides, and so then our action stops and we quit taking action. Now in the wild, that looks something like, I see a lion, I experience fear that there is a lion, so I run like hell to get away. Then I realize, oh, geez, I got away. Thank God I'm alive. So I stop running. If I'm what is this? A gazelle. I stop running, eat some grass, relax, and basically prepare for the next, scary thing to happen, or just wait till it happens. And then I go through the whole thing again. I haven't addressed the problem. I just am waiting for it to occur one more time. So this happens, for instance, here's yo-yo dieting. This is what a lot of us deal with. We go through the process of, at the beginning, we go and put on our pants, they don't fit, maybe we're going out or something. Then that internal sensation of like, hey, I don't want to be fat. So then we decide maybe when we go out that night, we're going to eat a salad, maybe not have any drinks. We start working out, we eat well overall. then when we go to put on our pants again to go out to another date or something, we realize, oh my God, they fit now. And then maybe that night, because maybe you even had a little extra room in those pants, you say, oh, screw it, I'm gonna have some burgers, fries, maybe even have a few beers. Next morning, you don't feel like going to the gym because of the beers, and before you know it, you're going through the same thing again. What you wanted here was not to be fit or be skinny. What you wanted was to not be fat. And once that stimulus of feeling fat ended, you stopped taking action against fatness. Now, here's the same thing in the imposter syndrome. So in the imposter syndrome, we're seeing that this, whether it's meeting a successful business owner or whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. We meet a successful business owner, then we realize that we're not as well put together. We may get found out. We're not like, we don't represent ourselves the same way as this person does, because we're really comparing ourselves, our A game to their, or our B game to their A game. We know all the crap that we do and all the reasons that we are not as good as they are. But, you know, if we're sitting there watching, for instance, Shark Tank, we're not seeing the reality of all of the sharks that are sitting up there. We're just seeing how they present themselves. So what do? We go out and we work harder to reinforce success. Now, that might be land a big deal. That might be write an article. I know all the YEC members here that are out, you know, we get to write articles all the time and we're sharing them. And it feels great for a moment when you see yourself in, you know, Huffington Post or something like that. But at the end of the day, you know, has that really gotten you to what you want? Well, what it did is it helped you feel as though you were being accepted for your success, or your success was being acknowledged. Now, once you have that, you think, oh man, people think I'm a success. I don't need to keep working as hard. Maybe I can relax. And then you go through the same cycle. Maybe it's not meeting a business owner. Maybe it's something else. Same thing happens at the organizational level. We see this all the time. Competitor releases a new product. So, you know, a large organization releases an iterative product, not because they want to grow their business and be successful. It's because the leaders don't want to fail. They don't want to not be successful. So the goal is to not be successful. And they say that they're content with stable growth, and they just sit there and wait until something from the outside pushes them to have to take action. Happens with work hard, play hard too. This is, you know, sitting there, you get all amped up watching Gary Vee scream at you through YouTube. So then you get all amped up. You're reminded that you got to go out there and that you still have to make it, that you got to, you know, accomplish these things in your life. And so then you work really, really hard. You make a little bit of money. Then you know what? It's time to play hard, right? So then you go out and you play hard until all of a sudden something reminds you, hey, I got to get out there and keep working again. And it's a process that goes around and around and around and around. Now, what's really happening here is we've got a problem that appears. We've got, I apologize, guys. I'm going to do something really quick because I've got the chat popping up where I need to be able to see. Sorry about that. Let me go back. So what's really happening is the problem appears that internal sensation that you feel is actually what's motivating you. So you're being motivated by, in most cases, fear. So you're motivated to end the fear, to end the anxiety. So then you make progress towards resolving that problem. So then your motivation subsides as you make progress, and then you just sit around and wait until the next problem appears. Now, we don't feel like we're sitting around. We just go back into our mundane, our, you know, whatever it is that we're working towards or working on a daily basis. But then these large problems occur and we go through this cycle again. And so oftentimes this is how we also build ourselves into additional problems, because we're sitting there waiting for something to happen. We're not making incremental small steps. Maybe it is that we're trying to go and make a giant leap into something, make a giant advancement in our business, but because we are motivated by fear, we're sitting back and we're not taking the baby steps that we could be taking. And I think every single entrepreneur, if you haven't already experienced this, I'm sorry if I'm going to spoil this for you. At some point you have your back against the wall and your internal resistance to doing something is completely overtaken by your fear of consequence. And that's where this cycle occurs. So our internal resistance is overtaken by some sort of external force. And so we as humans want to have a very consistent, slow, comfortable life. Even as entrepreneurs, we want to have at least stability within our lives. And this process is the process of getting ourselves to that stability, at least in our mind. So here, I'll click through this. But one of the things to keep in mind is that most of us think that where we're trying to get to is just someplace around where the action stops. And I think we've all seen couples who think that marital bliss is actually someplace around where the action stops. And by action, I mean he or she gets angry with the other one. They feel upset, hurt, fearful of something going on in the relationship. So they get in a big old fight and they're yelling and screaming. And then, they sort of make up, and then they go back to everything just sort of being in equilibrium until the whole cycle happens again. And what this is showing is that it's a cycle. There is no equilibrium here. So going a little bit more into the fear motivation, we're more likely to experience it because, first of all, we all have a fear of failure. Our failure always feels much more personal than an employee's failure, right? We also, because we have a sort of non-definition of failure, we haven't truly defined success, this can be a lot more acute for us. So it's important to keep in mind that your fear is something that begins to be the thing that's driving you. And over time, you actually look for the fear. I'm sure that many of us have gone out there and purposefully made our lives more complicated as entrepreneurs because that feeling of fear had resided. We had been reduced. When we don't feel that, we feel anxious. Why is it that we can go sell a business and then what do we end up doing? For me, I ended up filling up my entire day doing things like going to the grocery store, going to Home Depot, starting new projects, because I needed that feeling, that fix of doing something all the time. And it was really responding to my own internal feelings and emotions. It wasn't anything that was external. It wasn't just how I am. Remember, it's seeking to avoid a feeling rather than achieve a goal. And something else to really think about here is anytime that you are, and this is key, anytime that you're presented with the same challenge again and again and again, it's probably the fear cycle at work. And here we go with it. If all you're trying to do is get yourself away from fear, you're not going to make any progress. You're just constantly going to be going up and down, up and down. If your goal is to not be a failure, if your goal is to just not feel bad, not feel unsuccessful, then this is what your path is going to look like. I know that there's the other success path that's all crazy and stuff. This is actually what most of our motivation, most of our emotional lives look like. So the only thing that you're going to achieve out of this is some of the same things, is that you're going to avoid the extreme negative, but it also ends up muting the positive emotions that we want to experience in our life. It doesn't give us the ability to really experience something like happiness, because happiness is just simply the lack of fear. Once again, caused by trying to make massive improvements, using external sources as the measure of our success, and trying to avoid our self-doubt, fear, and pursuing a desire for acceptance. Beating this comes into starting small, very much like how we deal with anxiety. Starting small, creating manageable steps, and having faith, and this is where being a leader comes in, having faith that over time, your progression will accelerate. Each baby step will become a bigger step. Because at the end of the day, exponential growth looks painfully slow until it gets absurdly big. And this is the pathway that most of us just don't have the patience to go through. So before we get into this part real quick, I want to see if there's any other questions. Sorry, I'm still getting used to this webinar thing. So do we have anybody that's got a question at this point? All right, let's keep going. So now, is it you or is it them? Now, this is a interesting part to look at, because a lot of what we end up dealing with is not just internal. It has to do with the people around us and the way that we interact with them. Now, the drama triangle is something that, if you know me, you've probably heard about. This has made a huge difference in my life and in the life of so many people that I've worked with over the years. So we'll go through a number of examples here, and I'm happy to go through situations in your guys' lives that you may think don't fit into this paradigm. But it starts out with 3 different roles, right? You've got the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer, thus the triangle. The victim is really the central role in all of this. Feels like everything is acting against them, that the world is happening to them. They're not able to get something that they want because they're being prevented in their movement towards that. They say, oh, poor me. I'm not powerful enough to be able to overcome this particular situation. There's oftentimes people competing to be the victim. If you guys spend any time watching politics, then you're going to see this pretty often. You see a lot of people getting up and talking about their own victimhood, and oftentimes our arguments with people are not a matter of trying to resolve an issue. We're actually in an argument competing against or competing to be a victim, and who is the biggest victim in a situation. One of the other key things is victims don't have the power to change their situation in their own mind. And a lot of times you'll hear things like, that's just who I am, I'm not good at something. Words like that when the victim is stepping up and in the spotlight. The persecutor is also known as the villain in the situation. It's blamed as the source of the cause of all of the victim's problems. It cannot exist without a victim. And it may be a person, situation, belief, circumstance, thing. It doesn't need to be a person, though. When it's yourself, a lot of times, and this is something that can lead to depression as well, because remember, this is looking at a event in the past. I shouldn't have done that. I should have done something different. And so what you're actually doing is persecuting yourself. It's your past self that is persecuting your current self. So you are now, of course, if you're here in the present, you can't change something that happened in the past. So you're merely choosing to be a victim as opposed to move forward. And I'm going to use the term choose to be a victim here. There are cases, of course, where there is true victimhood. I'm not addressing those here. When the persecutor is someone else, they may blame you, say that it's your fault, you didn't try hard enough. And when the persecutor is attacking a group, they'll say, oh, those people just don't get it. Or even as the victim, you may say, oh, this person is so mean to me, he just doesn't get it. Or they just don't get why, or he doesn't get, she doesn't get why we are this way or why we do these things. They just choose to be mean. The rescuer is the hero and enables the victim's behavior. It's actually the hero that creates the victim, because without a hero, there wouldn't be a victim. We'll get into that more in a moment. And it doesn't need to be a person necessarily. It's essentially the person, the rescuer says to the victim, poor you, let me help you. If you think about this, it's imagine somebody who's going out and is not very good at shooting a three-pointer. And so then the basketball coach, instead of working with this individual on how to shoot a three-point shot, just steps out on the court and takes a shot for him. He rescues the person from the situation. Ultimately, the rescuer gives temporary relief and makes the immediate pain go away without addressing the core issue. So That may be something, what does that sound like to some of you guys? Maybe drinking a beer or smoking a joint, or having somebody that you can go vent to. It's not something that actually addresses the problem that you're facing. And ultimately, the person who is the rescuer, if it is a person, they don't want themselves or someone else to feel bad, which is oftentimes the role that we will step into as a boss when we are running a company. And we also seek our value by being needed by others. And that's something else to really be attentive to, because if your role in running a company is to be needed by others, you're actually not helping them in the work that you're doing. And it's ultimately going to alienate you, because we can go back to playing roles. If you're playing the role of helping someone, you're not standing there with them and experiencing it with them. You're just trying to feel better by being their savior. There's never just two elements present in the drama triangle. If you see a victim and a persecutor, then chances are you may be the hero. If you see that there is a hero and a persecutor, you're somehow acting against somebody who's being mean to other people, or that's just a bad person in general, then chances are that you are a hero to someone. You just haven't clearly identified the victim to yourself yet. Feels like sometimes I feel like I have overarching low emotional cycles that last a week or so. Feels like a fog cloud of more negative types of emotions, thoughts. What is it? James, we'll dig into that a little bit as well. That's something that's outside of this drama triangle. This is more about interpersonal dynamics, but I will definitely come back and address that. Ultimately, the drama triangle is something that drains energy for every single person involved. And this is where burnout starts to occur, because you don't necessarily realize that you're in this dynamic, but what you're doing is you're trying to either exert control over somebody else, or you're giving up your control to someone and hoping that they will take over for you. And so in any case, you're either giving up or trying to force your energy and your emotions and efforts onto somebody else. And ultimately it is extremely draining. Now there is a alternative to this, which is, I'll get to in just one moment here. Here's an example of having poor sales within a company. A uncooperative sales team. The business owner is dealing with the challenges of being a victim of a sales team that may not be properly trained. Maybe he went through and hired them without clearly defining their roles, so on and so forth. Some of the stuff that we already talked about. Goes and finds a rescuer of the consultant. The consultant is the one that then comes in and takes care of the situation, fixes the uncooperative sales team. The business owner hasn't improved their management ability, and ultimately future hires and future interactions with the sales team probably won't be any better than they were in this case. Now, another situation with maybe the sales manager that was involved with the quote uncooperative sales team. Sales manager may be frustrated at an inept business owner, for instance, and feels like the consultant is there attacking a job that really he's not being provided the tools to perform at. So what does the sales manager do? Maybe turns to alcohol or complaining to friends. Now, breaking the drama triangle, the alternative is if there's three people involved, the victim becomes a creator, creating an outcome for themselves instead of looking for someone to do it for them. The persecutor becomes a challenger. It's a challenge to be overcome, not an insurmountable obstacle preventing them from getting what they want out of life. And the rescuer or hero becomes a coach, helping the creator create that outcome or access that part within them, as opposed to simply sitting back and or allowing the victim to sit back and have the hero do the work for them. So here's another rundown of that exact thing, walking through the same points. Now, the same example with poor sales. Now, instead of the challenge being a person, being the sales team, the challenge is improving the sales. And the creator is the sales team, and maybe even the business owner, they're working together, and a good consultant comes in and is actually working with the team to improve their sales, improve their abilities, and probably improve communication between the sales team and the business owner. So ultimately, it's empowering versus disempowering. In any situation that you are facing, where you start to feel that you're taking on one of these roles, it's important to start to think about the ABCs, whatever the adversity is, what is your belief about that adversity, and then what is the consequence? Because if you change the belief, you will change the consequence of that adversity. So if we go back here to a common scenario that I addressed earlier, which is not having the time to deal with staff. The persecutor is poorly trained staff and no time for the owner to train the staff. The rescuer is the idea of making money to train new staff. So when I one day have enough money, I will be able to train the staff. And the victim is the business owner. So the adversity is the poorly trained staff. The belief is I can't fire them because I didn't train them correctly. And the consequence is the business suffers because the business owner starts doing the work for the poorly trained staff and is just basically subsidizing this staff. Very common scenario, by the way. Now, to flip this around, there may not even need to be a coach because the coach is merely that ABC. The adversity being the poorly trained staff. The belief is instead of that they are powerless, the belief is, hey, it's not too late to begin training my staff. So the consequence is that the business owner invests time and effort and improves the staff performance, and ultimately the overall staff performance improves and the business improves. In the case that you have people or situations that refuse to be broken out of the drama triangle, which it does happen more often than you would expect, you ultimately get to a point where you may just need to remove that person from your business or remove that person in some way from your life, because there is not an alternative to say, how do we put this victim into a box or this persecutor into a box? If they continue to keep doing those things, the only things that you can learn to do is cope. You cannot improve through that situation. Okay, so I just went through the biggest topics. So everything else is a little bit easier to get through. And James, are you going to be around for a little bit? So once I finish up with this, then we can maybe dig into your situation with the group. Will you be around? Okay. Well, no response yet from James, but if he does respond, then here, 1 second. I've got actually a Q&A. Oh, it just says yes. All right. So I'm just going to hop into this. We'll come back to James. If he's here, then hopefully we can ask him some questions too. 4 pillars of health. Now, I use this with my clients to help them avoid getting sucked into the situations associated with the fear cycle. If you keep this in focus, it will prevent you from getting thrown off course. Now, So the 4 pillars are physical health, mental health, relationships, and financial health. And so I've had people argue with me that there maybe should be spiritual, other things. We're going to stick with this because it's my experience that if you don't have these 4, it's difficult to build any sort of practice. The constant, what I already addressed, is the constant management of these helps reduce fear-based responses. If any of these are neglected, they can sabotage your success. and the neglected, whatever that neglected aspect can quickly of your life is, can quickly sap your energy and your motivation by pulling your focus away from whatever it is that you're doing. Creating a healthy baseline. This is a proactive approach. It's something that's a statement that can be true for the rest of your life. It's not a goal, but a minimum accepted level of health in all of these aspects. Yeah, guys, I see your questions here. We'll touch on motivation a little bit too. The physical example is, just briefly, something that is going to stick with you for the rest of your life, not something that, with all of these, it's not something that is to be achieved or will go away over time. So the example, I want to feel and know that I'm healthy versus I want a six-pack abs, a certain size waist, things like that. Fly through these. One of the things that I do with my clients is it's a check-in where we go through all 4 aspects of their life, and they do this on their own, and they can track their success over time. So this is something I'm happy to share with everybody on this webinar as well. And so now, Leanna, you asked about motivation, and that will slightly be addressed here in this part about serving others. But I think that if you talk about motivation, think about momentarily as well how that might apply to reacting to emotions or excitement. So if excitement is actually a derivative of anxiety, what you're doing is rather than working towards something and creating manageable steps that you can push yourself through, you're actually creating you're looking for that internal feeling to push you through. So you're actually looking for excitement or anxiety because you've been so attuned to that. So you're not going to have the same emotional presence every single day. I think if you think about business, just like being in a marriage, I can tell you, I don't know if my wife is on this, but you're not going to feel the same way about your partner every day. You're not going to feel the same way about your business every day. But when you are looking for that feeling all the time, that's almost like an addiction, right? You're looking for a feeling of, what it feels like to drink alcohol. So you're going out and seeking the feeling that is associated with it versus actually going out and serving someone and building something that's bigger, that's going to impact the world. So there's a lot of pushing through. There's a lot of things that you're going to do that you don't necessarily feel like doing. And motivation is, I think Tony Robbins said something along the lines of like, motivation is a wet blanket. Motivation is sort of, it's a ticket to entry, right? It got you started in the first place. And what we're talking about here is not motivation, but it's how do you get past that initial motivation, which is, that gets you started. Let's call it the honeymoon phase of the relationship, and then get you through the tough times. And it's keeping you focused on why you got started in the first place. And a lot of times that'll change too. And that's where what we're going to get into here as well. But just remember that when you're focused on the feeling of motivation, then that is a feeling that's driving you, not the reality of what's going on in the world. We can elaborate a lot more on that if you'd like. But believe it or not, burnout is self-focused, just like focusing on, hey, I don't feel motivated today. Maybe I'm, building a device that can save the world and I'm a few steps away from curing cancer, but I don't really feel like going to work today because I just don't have that fuzzy feeling. So I'm not going to go. Ultimately, burnout overall is self-focused. Your business is only going to be as healthy as you are. So if you're not taking care of yourself, that's also kind of selfish, because if you don't take care of yourself, your business cannot grow. Your business, the people that you serve with your business are not going to be able to be served if you're not taking care of yourself, if you burn out. So when you're in the fear cycle, and whether it's fear, anxiety, excitement, all of these, you're prioritizing your own emotions over something larger than yourself. The drama triangle occurs when you focus on the impact that others have on you, on how you feel. And burnout occurs ultimately when you're just focused on yourself as opposed to focused on the work that you're doing in the world. So number one, starting with service. Now, who or what does your business serve? If it's just to make you money, then you're probably going to burn out. In fact, I'll guarantee you that you'll burn out at some point. How does your business serve them? What value do you create? Answer all these questions for yourself. If you have trouble, put yourself in your customer's shoes. Tell your customer's story. Maybe it's not a customer. Maybe it's a stakeholder in the community. But always consider, how can you serve them better? And speak with the people that you're serving as often as you can. And if I don't care if you're just starting out, make sure that you are in front of the people that you serve on a regular basis, daily or weekly. One of the quotes that I love when it comes to service is something by the Bengali poet Tagore, and I've memorized this, and it's something that I recite often, and it goes, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service is joy." And what that reminds me of is that service is a two-way street. It's not that service is at the expense of your joy. It's not that you have to build up a big bank account of joy or a business that produces joy and then you can go out and serve. It's that it's a two-way street. It's not charity. This is getting paid to teach someone to fish so that you can continue to teach people to fish, as opposed to giving someone a fish. When you focus on service, I guarantee you will be successful. It puts your focus on other people rather than yourself. The emotions that you feel, the motivation that you feel that you may be lacking, is something that is really moved out of the focus of your attention, because now you're seeing the impact that you have on others. It will rejuvenate you. It reminds you that your efforts are constantly returned to you. Service will not burn you out. When you're focused on service, it will not burn you out. I mean, if we want to talk about people going through and serving people and accomplishing great things, I mean, if anybody was likely to get burned out, it's great people like Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, but they were focused on serving others. And that can happen in a business. And remember that part of service is that it is necessarily sustainable, and rest, self-care, rejuvenation, working out, meditation, all these things, the things that you do to take care of yourself is service. If you're taking care of yourself so that you can better serve others, you are actually doing your work as an entrepreneur, as a founder. When you think that service is impossible in your business, and I've had people tell me this, you are serving something. What is it? Is it an idea? Is it a thing? Is it a person? And that answer may just be money and self. You'll get burned out there. The other thing that you may find, especially if you're feeling burned out, is that your business may be in conflict with your values. And so one of the things to ask yourself is are you proud of who or what your company serves? Because if you're not, I guarantee you, even if your company is serving, but you're not proud of what it is that they're serving, you will burn out. So this gets into emotions a little bit more. And this is the sixth sense. It's an idea from Buddhist psychology as well. As opposed to just having five senses, we have the bodily sensations, the emotions that we feel. We do everything we can in our world right now to resist emotions, to resist feelings. So this is foreign to us, especially here in the Western world. We take a lot of drugs to try to avoid our feelings. We do a lot of things. We sit in front of TVs. We have, alcohol, heavy food, everything to avoid. So the fear cycle plays into that. So remember, even taking those pharmaceutical drugs is in reaction to the emotion, the feeling that you're feeling, rather than sitting with the feeling. So to begin with, it's stopping resisting the sensations that you're feeling within you. first and foremost, you are not your emotions. They do not control you. You can express your emotions rather than without being controlled by them. We all think like, oh, if I'm sad and I express sadness, I'm going to be just like a heap on the floor, bawling my eyes out. It may happen the first time, but as you get more attuned to how you express your emotions, that will not occur as often. They will flow more freely through you. And when you resist them, sadness is a great example. You've probably experienced when you've tried not to cry. What happens? It starts to get painful. Your face burns, your throat gets tight, maybe your chest gets tight, you start to sort of choke up. But then once you cry, and let the sadness out, it all just flows out. It happens with anger, it happens with everything. So it doesn't mean that you have to go, if you're angry, go act on anger and hurt someone. But to be able to express that you are angry will do great things for you. It also will improve your communications, which communicating to someone that you're angry and employing that emotion, for instance, or that you're stressed or whatever the emotion is, will increase the connection you have between yourself and another. One of the ways to start to tap into this is to notice the things going on in your body. It's not necessarily just the emotion, but it's the tension, the tightness, pain, dullness, warmth, coolness within your body. We were talking before about hunching shoulders. When somebody comes into a room that makes you feel scared, chances are you start to go like this. You start to act like, going back to the fear cycle, you've got a lion coming after you and you're the prey hiding, trying to not be seen. There is no such thing as a negative emotion. So there's a lot of things that we think that we're trying to avoid because it's negative. They're undesirable and desirable, but there's nothing negative about any of these emotions. They may not feel good, but it's a data point that allows us to understand more about what's going on in our world. And so even fear or anxiety or any of those, oftentimes we'll feel those in our body. We'll start to hunch our shoulders or get tight, or maybe even break a little bit of a sweat before we realize that we're anxious or nervous, or that we're scared, or we just get something in the pit of our stomach before we realize that the person sitting across the table from us really is a shyster. So pay attention to those things, because oftentimes your bodily sensations will give you more insight into your world than your eyes, your ears, your smell, taste, touch. It will tell you so much more, and it's often there before you realize it. So the more you become attuned to it, the more attuned you will be, the better leader you'll be, the better negotiator you'll be. The greatest leaders, warriors, hunters, the greatest caretakers are all very, very attuned to these sensations within their body. It gives them so much positive, so much worthwhile information about the world. So you can improve your relationship with your emotions through meditation, first and foremost. That helps you sit and recognize the things that are going on within your body. Meditation, in my view, is not about sitting and having a silent mind. It's about observing what's going on both in your mind and in your body. And that practice will help you in all aspects of life. Safe communication with your peers. Communicating with them is key to be able to express your emotions and get used to expressing them with other people. Having a group to do that's really important. If you need help finding one, please, let me know. I'm happy to help people find groups like that. Journaling I didn't touch on, but journaling is phenomenal. It's a great way to sort of reflect on what's going on and process things from a slightly different perspective on the page. Coaching, of course, is great, working with a good coach. And any regular practice overall will help you tap into these, because you're going to have a baseline that you can come back to and notice the differences that are going on within your mind or body. But ultimately, the first four are definitely the most impactful in these practices. Facing undesirable emotions. This is a very, very important part of this process. So the first thing is breathe. Clarify your next immediate step. Once again, similar to the approach to anxiety. But that next immediate step is to ask yourself, what does this sensation feel like? What's going on within your body? And be present with it. Be curious about what information that sensation is telling or giving you, because it's actually something just like, you know, the noise of the garbage truck that's going on outside. That tells me that that garbage truck is there. The little bit of flutter that I feel right now is the anxiety that, oh, I may not be heard by everybody here, and you guys may think that I'm not as professional or as good of a presenter because of this noise that's going on because I left the window open. So when you sit there, once again, be curious. Don't resist it. Don't resist the emotion. When you bring curiosity to it, it's a much softer touch. And so you're going to realize very quickly that the sadness, the anger, the anxiety are not as strong when you're curious about them. Meditate if you can, and I'll give some resources about meditation to all the participants if they'd like. Ask yourself, how is the experience impacting you? Just give a name to it. What are you feeling? Where are the sensations the strongest? Is it in between your shoulders, in your chest, in your stomach? Are your feet sweaty? Does it impact your breath? Does your breath impact the feeling as well? Can you, if you breathe deeper, does it diminish? Or if you breathe more shallowly, does it diminish or get stronger? Can you relax into the sensations and don't try to change the feelings? Just experience them and be curious. It sounds really difficult, but trust me, when you start to do this, it's amazing how it really just becomes an element of something that you're perceiving about yourself and realizing it gives you information about the world. Here's some more ways to start to define what it's doing. Is it heavy or light? Is there movement? Is it active or still? Does it move through your body? Anxiety, for instance, when you feel it like when I feel it in my chest, it's like a fluttering. And you know, when I meditate and bring my focus to it, oftentimes it feels as though there's a light to it, like it's almost, there's a luminance. That may be too much for some of you guys to handle if you haven't meditated before. So when you do have an acute emotion, like a sudden fear, sudden anxiety, something is, you know, very, very strong in your body. Sit or stand straight. Don't slouch. Don't, you know, lean back in the chair. Sit and stand straight. Don't, absolutely no slouching in this. Inhale deeply through the nose. And if, I know I don't have any of you guys on video, but I'm going to go through this process here real quick, just once. And then you guys can follow along if you'd like. But sit or stand straight and proud. Inhale through the nose deeply. Hold for a count of 3. At this point, don't exhale. Inhale as much more as you can. As you do this, imagine filling all of, not just your chest, but your stomach and all the way down your entire torso, down into your pelvis. Now exhale fully through the mouth, compressing your stomach while you do that. And then pause for a count of 3 and go through the process again. Try to do it 10 times. Breathing deeply like that is exactly counter to how our fear, our excitement, and our anxiety is experienced in our body. When you breathe deeply like that, you know, anxiety is something that is a quick, short breath. And same thing with excitement and fear. This will make a massive difference in how your body experiences that emotion, that feeling. Also, when you're dealing with an acute emotion, change your location or state. The best one, just get up and go for a run. Releases endorphins, things like that. Go to a quiet room and meditate. Go for a walk. Go to a coffee shop. Just change your state and move. So routine is one of the last things. Don't be reactive. So many of us wake up, first thing we do is we have our phone, and we use this to wake us up in the morning. We use this to immediately go to Facebook, look at our notifications. You're reactive right off the bat. You're being put into that fear cycle first thing in the morning. So use a real alarm clock. Don't use your phone. Don't touch your phone or your computer until after your morning routine. And if you can, wake up before the other people in your home, so that if you have demands on you, if you have kids in the house, get up before them. That may seem impossible, but do your best to try to create a day that you can have some space to make this happen. Write down your plan ahead of time and stick to it. This is really important. So stick to your plan once you've created it. I highly recommend, my morning routine is drinking water first and foremost. Have a full glass. Then I go in and I'll either do yoga or meditate first. Then I do the other. My yoga it's about 5 minutes total. I'm happy to share that practice with you guys if you'd like. Meditate, 10 minutes is great. If you can do 20, even better. Journal, and then other options are exercise, go for a walk, things like that. But have a morning routine that puts you in a position of making decisions about your day and not reacting to your day. Love to hear yoga and meditating practices. I'll come back to those. I'll give you a bunch of info about that, Leanna. The evening routine, this is something that personally, it doesn't make a big impact in my life, but has made a big impact in other people's lives that I've worked with. I would say, don't do this instead of a morning routine. Do this in addition to going through and reviewing your accomplishments for the day, your priorities for tomorrow. You can journal and you can meditate. Meditating in the evening will definitely help you go to sleep at night. Every day, exercise if you can, interaction with people, friends about non-business topics, get outside, meditate. One of the most productive times you can have in your day is if you take 30 to 60 minutes, close the door, have nothing with you but a pen and paper. If that, don't even use that time to meditate. Use that time to reflect and focus on the things that are going on in your life, and just use it as a space to think. It will be so productive. It's so difficult for us to add into our lives, but it is a life changer. And then also just make sure that you, at some point, reflect on your accomplishments on the day, and then also what you're going to do tomorrow, so that you're not waking up once again in that space of not knowing what to do next, which is a place where anxiety can start to creep in. Other regular practices: go on vacation, organize, declutter, take a date night, go on a vacation on your own, and go to recreational events with people that you appreciate and care about, and just get away from work. Gratitude practice, this is something that I'm a big believer in. There's a couple of different ways to do this. The one that I suggest to most people is every day write down 10 unique things that you're grateful for, and it's something that happened in the last 24 hours. It's not, I'm grateful for being born in America or for living in California. It's, I'm grateful for the beautiful steak dinner that my wife made last night, and sorry, I'm looking at the kitchen while I'm talking to you, thinking about food. And get specific and use some very specific examples of why you're grateful for something. Don't just make it generic. Maybe you're grateful for the smile that somebody gave you at the coffee shop. But as you reflect on those things, it just becomes, it comes into your daily conscious much more. So there we go, questions and conversation about this. So James, let me see how do I get out of this? Stop the share. Cool. So James, you asked about overarching low emotional cycles, and that this has been going on for a few weeks. So does the process of what I talked about with respect to motivation and the fear cycle, does that start to make sense? You go away for a month, then maybe come back for a week. Is there anything that you're doing during those times that changes or impacts that's different? Are you working on a project? Do you change the way that you approach work during that time? Is there anything different? I may be able to put you on video if you're willing to do that. Can't really notice anything. So he says he can't really notice anything that that's different during that time. Honestly, if you're sorry, James's question is that sometimes I feel like I have overarching low emotional cycles that last a week or so. Feels like a fog cloud of more negative type emotions, thoughts. What is that? So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that there's, and James, you can give me feedback on this. Is there, so there's no impact in this in like fits and spurts in work? Like when you're feeling good, do you work harder? Are you more focused at your work? Or is it consistent whether you've got this emotional response or not? This is okay. So he's saying that his work is the same despite his emotional response being different. So if it is the same throughout this entire time, then I would challenge you to actually step out, and rather than saying, okay, I'm going to go back to work, I'm going to do things the exact same way, maybe it's time to start adding a participation in groups with peers. I would really be focused on who it is that you're serving during those times and what work it is that you're doing in the world, and trying to tap into the people that you are serving through your work. The more that you can get that focus off of yourself and onto others, the more that you're going to realize that there's positive emotions that are developed within you. Now, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist, so my approach is not to diagnose why that happens. My approach is to help you create a plan to ensure that that doesn't happen in the future, or how to handle it when it occurs in the future. One other thing that I think is very important to note is that there is no consistent emotional state. You're going to have emotions come and go. You're going to have the desirable and the undesirable emotions. You will not get around that. So sometimes what happens is when we start to feel the undesirable emotions, we actually hang on to the fact that we're and basically persecute ourselves. If you remember that drama triangle, saying, I feel like crap, I'm not motivated, I am not being a good founder, I'm not being a good leader, I'm not being a good business owner, and it compounds that. So when you start to feel those things, don't be hard on yourself for feeling those. Accept that that's part of the process. You can take action and interact with people. You can do things to try to lessen the experience, but don't reject the experience, because when you reject it, that's actually creating more ability for that or a greater hold in you, when you resist those. Because it's, you said, yeah, I hate those feelings and get scared or angry that I'm having them, or that I'm having a low. There's not, so that, yeah, that goes exactly to what I was saying. There is nothing to be scared about, and there's certainly nothing to be angry at yourself about for experiencing that. That's part of the experience of being human. Everything has a cycle. I know that when you watch TV, the people on TV seem like they're always perfect. They're always, I mean, look, I can't even do a webinar without my hair being crazy. They have perfect hair. They have everything going on. So Liana said, I get into the same funks that James experiences. Not the not making money part of my business is not what I focus on or why I took the leap into entrepreneurship, but it is completely debilitating. I'm constantly in a state of, should I give up? Liana, are you saying that the challenge is that you're not making money, and that's the stress that you're experiencing? Okay. Yes. So remember I talked about the 4 pillars on making sure that you've got a baseline of what it is that you want to achieve within each one of those aspects of your life. When you think about finance, understanding what that base level is of what is the minimum that you will endure in the area of financial health, for instance, is very, very important, because it's not a matter of saying, hey, this is my budget, this is what it's how do I want to live? And when I am not at that level, like let's say that money is impacting my decision making in certain areas of my life, and I don't ever want to have to decide on whether or not to eat a meal based on money. The moment that starts to even come into your perspective, that's where, before it gets pushed all the way into the present moment, that's where you then have to step back and say, hey, I'm not at that baseline, or I'm about to be pushed out of that minimum acceptable level, and therefore I need to start switching what I'm doing. And that may mean, because remember, none of those things in the 4 pillars had anything to do with running a business directly. So you asked, I'm constantly in a state of, should I give up? Well, what you're asking is maybe the wrong question, because what you've said there is it's a binary choice, right? Should I either continue or should I stop? Chances are, if you're not getting to that level and you're not achieving that place that you want to be at, then the question is not, should I give up? The question is, what should I be doing differently? Now, if the financial realm is where you're experiencing the challenge, that could be as simple as, maybe I need to get a second job and, work at the bar on the weekends or something like that. Or maybe you're approaching business in a way that needs to be shifted. Maybe when you start looking at who you're serving, and you say, am I really serving them the way that I best can? Maybe that shifts what it is that you're doing, and shifts your relationship with how you're making money in your business. But ultimately, what you've got is a situation that is, you're not achieving the outcome that you want. The input that you're putting in is probably somewhat consistent. So it's figuring out what that consistency is, and then learning whether or not that needs to change, or if there's something else that needs to change. So if we go to, if you think about the ABC, the adversity, belief, and consequence, if the adversity that you're facing is, should I give up? Then your belief is you only have one option. So the consequence is you're fighting against either doing what you're doing now and making that successful, or giving up. You're not giving yourself another option. So you have to step back and say, hey, I need some perspective here. And so much of what we experience is just perspective. We're running around and finding this, we're looking through this lens, or looking at things, thinking that everything's right here, right in front of us. And there's no perspective there. So the moment that we start to step back from it, that's where perspective starts to come in. And that's where, even just like this, Leanna, having this interaction here can give you a little bit more perspective. And that's why having people to work with, having peers that you can have these conversations with at a person-to-person level can help so much. So have I answered those questions? I know that those were a lot of that I was sort of answering 2 questions at once there. Cool. Rihanna says that we answered hers. James, does that make more sense to you? Because once again, if I go back to what I said at the beginning, there's no switch to flip. There's no one answer here. So I was trying to walk through what some of those challenges may be, but just let me know if that gives you a little bit more clarity, or if you want to dive into it a little bit deeper. And Cody, you asked a question about the book Leadership and Self-Deception, which is a great book that I recommend to a lot of people, and I think I recommended to you. But you're talking about coping versus being inside the box and outside the box. Ultimately, when I said coping with respect to people who are continuing to persecute, let's go back to, once again, if I use that ABC, if you say that somebody is continuing to persecute you, then what I had suggested is the opportunity to jump out of that, to jump out of that interaction, get out of it, and cease the ability for someone to persecute if they demand to be in that persecution role. So what you're asking is, how do you handle them if they continue to persecute? Now, if we go back to that ABC approach, is the adversity is that you are experiencing someone who is maybe particularly challenging. You're experiencing someone who is difficult in some way, shape, or form. Now, the belief that you hold is that they are persecuting you. And you're also holding a belief that you're fixed somehow, right? You can't leave, or they can't leave. Now, in most cases in the Western world, that's a belief that you don't have the ability to move, to get away from one another. Now, the consequence is that there's going to be constant tension between two people. The different way of looking at that may be, like, if you see the adversity as a difficulty in communication between yourself and someone else, the belief may be that rather than they're a persecutor, the belief may be something else. You could choose to look at it as though maybe this person is I don't know, they've got a particular difficulty in communicating, or maybe they are insecure in their role, and so maybe I need to communicate with them differently. And so maybe the belief that's being held is that I believe that this person should communicate with me in a certain way. And then lastly, the other belief is that I'm stuck in this situation. And so there's a lot of beliefs that you can challenge there, and I would challenge you to go through that idea of ABC of what is the adversity, what is a belief, and so what is that ultimate consequence that I'm experiencing? Because ultimately, if the belief is that you're stuck, the consequence is that you'll be stuck. So hopefully that answers your question, but I didn't really get into the specifics of leadership and self-deception there, which and comparing it to the coping piece, because coping is ultimately when you are seeking to not necessarily change the dynamics between yourself and the other person. You're just learning to handle it better. One of the put a punching bag up in your office type deals. All right, have we got any other questions, any other comments, thoughts? As far as meditation and yoga practice, that was a question. Meditation, if you do not meditate right now, the thing that I suggest most people do is hop on Headspace. Headspace is a super simple app. There's other ones out there, but the thing that I like about Headspace, at least to start, is, as far as I know, it's still this way. For free, you get what they call 10 for 10. It's 10 days of 10 minutes of meditation. And if you like it, it goes into 20 for 20, 20 minutes, or what is it, 15 for 15, then 20 for 20. 15 minutes for 15 days, 20 minutes for 20 days. And then they've got all sorts of other programs. Longer term, if you've been meditating for a while, I personally really have difficulty if I try to use that app now. I've done it. I've meditated for a long time. I sort of get to the point where you're hearing the same things over and over and over, and done in like a instructional sort of way. There's a lot of other places that you can get meditations from. If you're really interested in meditation, I'll send out a link there's a course called MBSR, Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, started by a guy named John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. But he put together this program that's 8 weeks that really helps you understand meditation. It develops you into somebody who has meditation as a regular practice in your life. There's a resource online that's a free version of that course that goes through all of the information, all of the videos, and there's a bunch of free downloads for guided meditations as well. It's a great place if you're really committed to trying to develop your meditation practice. Others are, there's a lot of apps. A lot of times all I use is something called Buddhify, which is a simple app on your phone that has what I think is the most pleasing silent timer with sort of an intro and an outro. But meditation is something that is so James just asked the question, or stated that I have been meditating for 10 years, and it seems to be getting harder, noisier than the past, and it seems to be getting harder. It's noisier than the past total blissed out moments. Did you go through that? So a couple of things. Number one is, yes, meditation sometimes is super easy. Other times, like parts of life, it gets very hard. It seems, James, one thing that you're talking about as an aside, remember that life is a cycle. There's constant cycles. So whether it's seasons, it's birth and death. I mean, everything in our life is constantly in motion. So things will change. Everything in your life does change. And so things will get harder. They'll sometimes be easier, especially when you're dealing with stuff that's going on internally. When you talk about the past total blissed out moments, that actually leads me to something that I think is super important about meditation, is that meditation is not about clearing the mind and being blissed out. Meditation is about learning to not attach yourself to the thoughts as they go through. So if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety about your work, about your business, if you're really stressed about your professional life or personal life, things that you're hanging on to and constantly going over in your head, then chances are that you're not as easily letting go of the thoughts as they go through your head. And those will, that happens, and it happens to me. There's some days that I try to meditate, and it's all I can do to not just get up and walk out and go get back to work, for instance, if there's something that's really on my mind. And sometimes that's okay. But I think that the question about your mind getting noisier is, remember that it's a process of just non-attachment to the thought as it goes through. For that time that you're sitting there, there's nothing to accomplish, there's nothing that you can do, and that having a silent mind is not the goal of the meditation. It's about allowing the thoughts as they arise to continue to just move along, and not to go down the wormhole of whatever that thought process is that's shown up for you. Once you start to go down the wormhole, it's it's like when you go hop online to check movie times, and 2 hours later you find yourself reading about the ex-girlfriend of the lead singer of Jethro Tull on Wikipedia. It's your brain just goes down this way and you completely lose track. So but yeah, ultimately it's learning to let it pass along. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but the answer for me is yes. Sometimes I find it harder to let go of the thoughts as they arise and pass through. And I really, really attach to them. And I find myself almost like trying to mentally bookmark them. And then I have to step back and say, whoa, dude, stop. Like, you're defeating the purpose. The only purpose of meditating is to sit down and meditate. There's nothing else to accomplish during that time. Leanna says that Deepak Chopra and Oprah, let me say them together, offer 21-day free meditation offerings periodically that are guided. Yeah, that's awesome. There's a lot of great resources out there, and I've got resources that I can, either send out to everybody on this, and if I put this up on YouTube, I can put it down below. But there's a lot of opportunities for free meditation resources out there. And if you look around, you're probably going to find a lot of places that you can go and do guided meditations as well in your local area. So there's a ton of options out there. So, all right, guys. If there's any new questions, I'm happy to touch on them. I guess yoga, real quick. What I do for yoga is a modified sun salutation, and I go through it and then do a couple of things on my back. But it's something I've developed myself over time, specific for the way that my body reacts to things. And so I would recommend starting with a couple of cycles of the sun salutation, which really, if you do that first thing in the morning, it'll help reset your body to waking up at that time, because the sun salutation specifically helps get blood moving through your body. So that's something I can also share. But if you just Google sun salutation, it's simple and it's all over the internet. So Chris says, yeah, please send out the presentation. Any readings on the drama triangle and solving it would also be helpful. I will definitely do that. I'll send out some resources on that as well. So yeah, if anybody else has questions, post them now. Otherwise, I appreciate it. I'm glad that I got to share all this stuff with you. Yeah, thank you, Leanna. Thank you, James. If you guys have questions, I'll go back to this real quick just so that you have it. I think you guys all have my my email, but there you go. We've got that email as well. So Brian at sbriansmith.com, and because I'm going to post this, I may not, you guys have my other email as well. So feel free to reach out. Thank you guys much. And yeah, take care of yourself. Go meditate for a little bit before you get back to work. Take care, guys.